Welcome to Random But Memorable, a podcast from 1Password. I'm Sarah, one of the founders at 1Password.
I'm Roo, head of password manager development.
I'm Matt Davey, 1Password's chief experience officer.
I'm Anna, the producer behind the show.
And we're the hosts behind Random But Memorable. Together, we offer up bi-weekly security advice, interview special guests from the cybersecurity community, and round up the latest in security news with Watchtower Weekly. We may even play a silly security game or two. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Are you eating?
So, well, I'm having a granola bar.
And you thought now would be the perfect time.
I'm so hungry.
Right. So I thought Anna was mocking us by having press record in the show notes. Because I was going to make a joke that, like, obviously we're professionals. We're absolutely going to hit record. But you turn up with breakfast. So I think my point is mute.
Yeah, it might even be moot, but correct. Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
So, Sarah, were you upset to miss the last episode?
I was.
I'm so sorry. I am genuinely sorry.
I was like waiting. I was like ready to go at a moment's notice. I'm like, I might have to just go podcast at 10 o'clock tonight, kids. We'll see ya. I love you, but I'm going to just have to drop everything. And then it was like, we recorded. And I'm like, okay.
I'm sorry. It was the end of a long week.
What if we record from our cars? We could do
podcast,
like a car recording.
That actually is not a bad idea. Because cars are reasonably well insulated.
It's true, yeah.
Maybe we should have a car episode.
Today's episode brought to you by BMW.
Yeah. Matt, you could be in the back of an Uber on the way to the airport.
I have a car. I mean, it's very small, but, yeah. Oh, we could do it in back of one of those self-driving cars.
Mm-hmm.
That might be terrifying.
I enjoyed that greatly when we were in, wherever we were.
Phoenix. Yeah, it was incredible. I loved it.
You've been in one?
Yeah, didn't I? We put the video. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Again with a mouthful. Did you see they unveiled the Formula One car with our logo on it? Honestly, it gave me the warm feeling.
All right, Red Bull Racing.
Have you not seen it?
No.
Okay, let me text you a picture.
Holy, we're right there. Oh my God.
We're right there. Yeah.
Where are you sharing this? What is he looking at?
Sorry, I text him.
Oh. See, this is the thing. This is where it's like, don't worry, Sarah. We'll call you when we podcast. What are you looking at together right now? We're even on the call together, and you're like, fuck it. Don't include her. She's just here for decoration.
Oh, my God.
She doesn't need to see it.
We also have a text group that includes Anna. I love it.
Right. We should mention that later on in the show, we are joined by 1Password co-founder and husband to Sarah, Dave Teare. While it might have felt like a therapy session for the three of us, I wanted to take the time to discuss the important topic of digital estate planning. There were plenty of very helpful tips in that conversation for folks to think about and conversation starters for couples to begin to address these considerations. So I think it's worthwhile to have a listen later on.
Fantastic.
Yay.
I very much enjoyed it.
It was fun.
The thing that I liked as well is that we, I think we had a lot of questions listed. Maybe we got to 3 of them. I went off track. You both then went off track. It was everybody off track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're looking for chaos, please listen on. If you're looking for, like, how do you do this? Probably not the show for you.
But with that, I think we can jump into Watchtower Weekly. This is where we summarize some of the latest security news, give the headlines from each of the stories, and share our thoughts. So first up this week, we have a blog post which I found incredibly wild, which is, everyone knows your location, tracking myself through in-app ads. So this is from a guy called Tim, and it's timsh.org. We will link it in the show notes. Basically, after a recent big data breach from Gravy Analytics that revealed that over 2,000 apps on both the App Store and the Google Play Store collect geolocation data without user consent, sometimes even without the developers knowing too, and Tim did some digging on this. So he found 3 of these apps on his own phone, which inspired to see if he could track down himself using this leaked location data. After the hours of digging, here's what he learned. So, Advertisers use real-time bidding, RTB, auctions to send out massive amounts of user data, including IP addresses and location to ad exchanges. He discovered that several requests from his phone contained his location, even with location services turned off.
Good Lord.
He also discovered that his data, including his IP address and approximate location, were shared with Unity ads and Facebook. Even though he didn't have any Meta apps installed, the Unity game he tested collected his data to fuel its $2 billion ad network. So he tried to buy his own location data from data brokers, but hit a massive wall as most services require huge budgets or are only accessible to big companies. Tim claimed that he would actually need between 10 and 50k to buy one of these huge databases. Still, the fact remains that his data was collected and then is still out there for sale. So he found even if you deny tracking permissions, your data can still be pieced together using IP addresses, device identifiers, and other signals. Data brokers and ad exchanges connect the dots, making it easy for companies or anyone with access to follow your every move through these things.
I will keep going through this story because when Matt shared this one, I was like, oh, this can't be anything. And I would encourage listeners to go and click the link, and there's a whole diagram on all the things. But I do the whole, like, download the free game, ask not to track, don't use this. I like to use it on the when you're not on the Wi-Fi and you don't use cellular data. Because you think, okay, now I'm not worrying about this. And then you get the ads served to you that are just not localized or anything. But it doesn't seem to matter. No matter what you do, there's still ways that they get all of your information, and then you end up in this big pot of information anyway. It's really a good study, and it's really kind of like, oh, how do I get free games without tracking it? I think you've got to go back to the snake game. Like, I think I need my old Nokia. I think that's the only answer at the end of this article.
This is why when the kids send a request to install an app from the App Store that I don't say yes to everything, even ones that have like a lot of stars and the high star rating and stuff like that. I'm like, ugh, like I don't know what this game is going to do. I don't know what other baggage this thing is bringing along, and I really wish that Apple could crack down on this a little bit more because this is gross and this sucks.
Agreed.
So yeah, Tim concluded the blog post by saying, this is the worst thing about these data trades that happen constantly around the world. Each part of it seems, is legit. It's the bigger picture that makes them look ugly. And then, Sarah, as you mentioned, how the data flows and how like all of these things are pieced together to get a really quite detailed look at your movements. It's terrifying. I don't like this at all. And I feel like there are some governments that are putting things in place towards, trying to make this better. But on the other side, advertisers just keep piecing together these small pieces of information based on identifiers, and they rebuild it on the other end.
Yeah, not great.
Okay, this next one, ransomware payments plummet as more victims refuse to pay. So this one's from HelpNet Security, and it's about Chainalysis, their latest report. Basically a 5 out of 10 for that name, terrible. I want to call them Chain Analysis every time I see them, but that's not how it is. Chainalysis? Yeah.
Chainalysis? Maybe? I don't know. It's bad.
Who knows? Okay, so their report on how the ransomware landscape has changed from 2023 to 2024 has shown a bit of a promising trend, unlike us to report on good news, that an increasing number of victims are refusing to pay the ransom. So a total volume of ransom payments decreased year over year by approximately 35%. This is what the blockchain analysts firm say. So in 2023, victims delivered $1.2 billion to ransomware attackers and data theft and extortion gangs. And in 2024, the number fell to 813.5 million. And as we know, because we covered many of them on this podcast, 2024 was marked by a number of high-profile attacks. Hackers accessed Snowflake accounts of many organizations and stole their data and impacted patients by launching a disruptive ransomware attack against a pathology services provider, which ended up affecting the National Health Service in England. On the positive side, though, law enforcement around the world have launched a number of attacks that have crippled some ransomware gangs, and the takedown of Lockbit's infrastructure in particular, and the unmasking of their Lockbit leader, the disruption of Alpha V and Black Cat leak sites. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that went on. And these actions are just one of the reasons for the decline of global amounts paid to ransomware and stolen encrypted data. Another reason for the fall in the total ransomware amount paid out in 2024 is improved cyber hygiene and overall resiliency. And Lizzie Cookson, the Senior Director of Incident Response at Coveware, commented, "The market never returned to the previous status quo following the collapse of Lockbit and Black Cat Alpha V. We saw a rise in lone actors, but we did not see any groups swiftly absorb their market share, as we had seen after prior high-profile takedown and closures. The current ransomware ecosystem is infused with a lot of newcomers who tend to focus on the small to mid-sized markets, which in turn are associated with more modest ransomware demands." So I think it turned to, lots of small targets rather than, some really high-profile big ones. So it probably means that there are more victims out there, but it's not affecting the huge numbers.
So for this next one of our listeners, Curtis, sent in this story for us to discuss. From NBCnews.com, children's data hacked after school software firm missed basic security step. A massive data breach at PowerSchool, a company that helps schools track millions of students, is believed to be the largest hack of children's personal information in U.S. history. PowerSchool systems store sensitive data like students' names, birthdays, addresses, and even social security numbers. A cybersecurity audit by CrowdStrike found that PowerSchool failed to take basic precautions, including not using two-factor authentication on an account that gave hackers access to millions of student records. The hackers demanded a ransom, which PowerSchool paid, which is a little bit against the story we just read, receiving a video of the hackers supposedly deleting the stolen data. However, experts warn there's no way to guarantee the data hadn't been copied or sold. PowerSchool declined to share specifics on how many students were affected by the hack, citing its ongoing investigation, but a spokesperson said the company was confident the number of students whose social security numbers were compromised was less than 25%, a figure that could still reach into the tens of millions. The breach reportedly affected up to 62 million children. Terry Loftus, the chief information officer for the San Diego County Office of Education, said, quote, "We may be talking about disabilities and what supports are being put in place for special education students. This is massively sensitive and something that's of high value to threat actors as far as reselling to various nefarious groups or data brokers. The incident highlights serious cybersecurity issues in educational technology, with experts criticizing the lack of industry standards to protect students' personal information. PowerSchool says it's working to improve security, but the impact of this breach could be felt for years." Sara Teare, the director of Berkeley's Public Interest Cybersecurity Program, commented on PowerSchool, saying, quote, "School districts really have no control over this product, and it's not up to them whether or not PowerSchool itself is implementing the correct security procedures within their own organization. The schools are very much at the mercy of these educational technology products." As someone with a spouse in education, this one does not surprise me. And also the amount of data that these systems hold is immense. Like, this is a treasure trove of highly sensitive information.
Everything.
Yes, that I'm not surprised to hear that it is not well protected. And that sucks.
No, and that's the hard part for the schools also, is that, like they said at the end, Sara Teare, there's very little that an actual individual school can do, because all of these directives come from the school boards, and those are all directed further up. Like, it's very hard when your school says it's rolling something out. There's not a lot of option to I don't think I like this company in my classroom, so we're not going to use it. Like, everything just ends up inside that whole system, and then you end up as part of a giant breach. It's scary because, these are your kids, but this is all of that information that can go on and be so impactful for their later lives. And our very first story, where you talk about none of the little pieces seem to be something until you step back and look at that bigger picture. And then all of a sudden, the data they can get from this and the data they can get from something else, the whole background industry of putting together all of these data files becomes quite scary and nefarious at the end of the day, which is not good.
Yeah, agreed.
It's too bad there's not, and that's the thing. I don't think, when we talk about regulations and all that kind of stuff, there's not sort of an overarching, are you involved in handling PII? Yes, no. PII, personally identifiable information. I believe I got those initials right. Is your company involved in that? If then, yes, you must do this and this, and like hold those companies to higher standards and be responsible for that, so that there's just that extra sort of layer of reassurance that you feel as a consumer that if someone's going to be storing your credit card number or your social insurance number or any of those things, like they are held to a higher standard of what that responsibility with that information is. I know it's something we take very seriously, but it doesn't seem like other companies do, it's sad.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, I think with the news covered, it's probably time to jump into the discussion that you and Matt had, Sarah, with Dave around digital estate planning and where 1Password can help with all of that.
I am looking forward to it. It was a good conversation.
So, we want to take part of the show to discuss the topic of digital estate planning. It's not something most of us want to think about, but the reality is that we all have to face it at some point. With so many folks finding conversations like this uncomfortable, the planning is often left undone. Loved ones are left to struggle with putting the puzzle pieces together while dealing with the emotions that come with loss. So we wanted to embrace this topic today to not only make it less intimidating for folks, but also help normalize these kind of conversations too. So joining us to tackle this subject are our 1Password founders, Sara and Dave Teare.
Yay!
Hello.
Fanfare. Yeah. The crowd goes wild. I don't think my funeral plans should be part of this. I also think 90% of them will be ignored because I also asked for it to say on my headstone, a stalwart of British fortitude. And I feel like that's just going to get ignored. But I like the idea of someone approaching my headstone many, many years later and thinking, God, that guy must have been something. Stalwart of British fortitude. That's like, they don't put that on anybody's grave.
I think you thought this through quite well. I feel maybe we should be interviewing you.
All right. So, welcome to the show, both of you. One of you is always on the show, but welcome nonetheless. And as we mentioned, estate planning can be a sensitive topic. So how did the two of you first approach discussing this as a couple? I feel like a therapist. I'm going to try and keep the therapy notes to a minimum here.
Well, we're still very young, but we got together when we were even younger. And back then, I think we ignored it for quite some time. So it was kind of easier back then.
Mm-hmm. I don't think we looked at it until we had our first kid. That was really what was, and for me, the will was more about what happens to our daughter if something happens to us. So that was really that first sense. Because, when it's much like the people who say, I don't care if somebody steals my identity. What are they going to do? Pay my Visa bill? Back then, it was, there wasn't really anything like, we've got a little crappy car that's paid for. And other than that, there's some mortgage payments. And what are we going to write a will for? Like, there's no assets to distribute or anything like that to think about. And then it was more, once we had our kid, it was like, okay, well, we need to figure out if something were to happen to both of us, how do we make sure she's taken care of and what does that look like? And so that was really that first, we should really look at this.
Yeah, everything changed with Abby on the way. We sold our cars, we downsized everything, like we moved closer to our parents. Lots of life changes happening at the time. So, but I don't think we still actually bit the bullet and actually did anything with the wills. Wasn't it until Jack was born?
We were starting it before we knew our second was coming, really. My dad had passed before we had our second, and unfortunately on my side of the family, folks don't seem to have a long life expectancy. And so the idea that, I don't know how much time I've got was sort of weighing on my brain, and then trying to figure out, like, how do we put all of that together in terms of the kids. When we were doing it originally, I had thought you had to have the same person, like whoever was the person in your will that did the thing was the person who did all of it. So when we were thinking, like, who's going to look after the kids? Like, these are people who, maybe we pick this person and they're super loving and they're going to be wonderful, but they are crap at managing a bank book. So, like, how do they handle having a house and trying to set up a college tuition fund? Like, they're not going to be able to do that. Like, how do we do that? And that was sort of that first inkling that you could have more than one person in charge of stuff. And I think that really helped it become something where we could actually put it on paper, where we could say, okay, now we have a real plan, as opposed to just trying to figure out one piece of it, I guess, was the thing.
So that must have been quite overwhelming as a conversation. You mentioned a number of life events all kind of like culminating in order to ride that. Like, do you have any advice for folks who might be kind of like overwhelmed or uncomfortable in starting these conversations?
I don't know about good advice, but I do know you have to find ways to make things comfortable for everybody. I always tell the kids, like, they're learning to drive now. Actually, Abby's been driving for longer than I want to admit. And I always just say, like, don't do anything in the car that you're not comfortable with, right? Like, if someone tells you to speed up, you only do that if you feel comfortable doing that. And it really applies here as well, because, like, Sarah and I are both a little bullheaded at times, and you can't force the other person to do anything. They're just kind of digging their feet. So it's like you both need to go along for the ride, and I don't know, you need to find ways to make the person feel comfortable with that. Maybe a little bit of an aside, but like with my parents, you know, they're very independent. They want to do everything themselves. And so Sarah's got like really creative ways to just like slowly but surely work her way into the conversation to, you know, I don't want to say taking over, but starting to be part of their daily lives so that, you know, when the time comes, she'll know everything that she needs, right? So something as simple as putting the medication out each week. She always goes down there and does that regardless of how tired she is. And at first I thought she was kind of, I don't know, just pushing too hard. But as I've done it a couple times, I'm like, it's actually quite smart because like it gives you time to actually just talk with your parents, see how they're doing, kind of normalize the conversation around like medicine. Because like a lot of people, including me and my parents, we actually don't talk too much to each other about
Health.
That's never really been a thing. But Sarah's, I don't know, she's worked her magic on me as well, because like now I actually like I'll talk about this stuff because like she's kind of slowly but surely normalized the conversation. And so, like I said, I don't know if I have actual advice, but just trying to normalize things and making people feel comfortable, it just makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, I think it's the little stuff like that. And I think that's like, for me, it's weird. Like, mortality and death hasn't really been scary. Like, I grew up with my mom working in long-term care. We experienced passing of grandparents and funerals. Like, I know people who are my age who haven't got any aunts or uncles or parents who have passed away, and they just haven't experienced that. And it's like their experience, whether it was like I lost a grandparent when I was 8, and then they've gone 30 years without anything. So having been through it, it's not something that's scary to me, in that it's not unknown. And I think a lot of times when people are thinking about estate planning and wills, the first thought is, I'm going to die. And so they have to get over that hurdle of like, how do I process that mentally before I talk about it, and then be comfortable with it in a way that's not really nonchalant or cavalier, because it is something that is important to talk about. And I think oftentimes in couples and relationships, it's hard to sometimes bring up what you're thinking about. But I think some of the stuff you can do, which I'm like, I feel like I'm like telling secrets, and I'm like, don't listen to this part, honey, because now you're going to know. But like, hey, did you hear about our friend who had this happen to them? Or, oh, I just saw this article in the news about this. Did you know this? Looking for information in the world that you can use to then use that as a Kickstarter for your conversation, so that you can come in and say, you know, the news was talking about how nobody our age has a will. And I realized we don't have a will. We should probably think about that, because what happens to, you know, Fluffy the cat if something happens to us? We should really think about those kinds of things. And I think that's where just trying to find those little moments in life to sort of start those conversations. And it doesn't have to be you sit down and decide everything all at once. Like, I know you were saying, Matt, you know, it took you 2 years to go from having your will done to having it signed and witnessed. That's okay. It's okay for things to take time. It's okay for you to be like, I'm not going to think about this today, but I'm going to think about that today. And we're going to talk about this little piece, because then when the time comes to put all of the paperwork together and do all of that, you kind of already talked about, I don't want to have a big service. I don't want to be buried. I want to be cremated. Using all of those opportunities in your life to sort of shape the conversation along the way, because it is just another journey in the life path of things you have to talk about. And I think that would be my main advice.
Just get started, I guess, is the main thing. Take the first step.
Nice. I like that as well. Yeah, so just get started, normalize, take small steps, and drop hints.
Yeah, like, we're not talking about leaving like funeral casket brochures lying around on the table. Like, it doesn't have to be like super dramatic. It's just, you know, little stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to some practical considerations. What are some key things that couples need to consider when creating an estate plan together?
There's a few different thoughts going through my head, but the one that keeps on coming back is, like, in every relationship, there's almost always someone that will be the driving force on this. And so, like, Sara is the driving force on this one. And so for a lot of this stuff, I've kind of sat back and said, well, let Sara drive, right? I've always thought, well, that's probably fine. You know, I'm the male. Statistically, I'll be gone first. So, like, that's all good and fine. So I kind of sat in the back seat for quite some time. But then after a while, I realized, wait a minute. My family's, they've been living pretty late in life, and Sarah's family, less so. Shit, maybe Sarah's going to be the first one to go. And then, like, I don't want to say panic, but like that's when I was kind of like, oh man, I got to really start paying attention here. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I suspect Sarah's got some things written out there for me so that if I were to ever find this, I would know what to do. But of course, if I went first, Sarah's fine. She's got it all covered already.
It's interesting because Abby is now 19 and she's like, so if you die first, I'm in charge, right? Like, I'm going to have to keep an eye on debt. And I'm like, you know what? I'm glad I didn't have to say it. Thanks for reading the room, kid. But I think that's for getting all of it started. I think the hardest part in all of this sort of stuff, and again, this is where I like to have the whole boxer pot discussion because it really it helps to make it funny, but it also takes the emotion out of it. I think when you're planning your wills and who's going to handle transferring the hydro account, who's going to handle the car insurance payments, who's going to handle all of that, really taking it and thinking about it from a practical, executable point of view. And really, like, how is this going to get done? Because it's something that has to get done. Someone has to go to the bank. Someone has to show your death certificate. Someone has to do all the work. Who's going to be that person? It really comes down to trying to put together a practical list. And when you're thinking of all these things, who's going to be the person that's going to get all of that done and remove emotion from things? I remember when we did the power of attorney for care and finances for my dad. And I remember, he picked me and he wanted me to do that as the role because he knew my mom would be too emotionally invested to make the choices that he wanted. So being able to sort of really think about who's going to think about things the way I do and who's going to make sure that they honor my wishes and who's going to be organized enough to do it. Because I think that it's in a very an emotional time, but part of estate planning is just really comes down to paperwork and it's all of that boring stuff. And who's going to have the patience and the fortitude to deal with all of the banks and getting all of that done.
So there's kind of like who's responsible, and then there's another thing of like utilities and continuance, I'd call it. Are there any more categories, like, just while we're in the kind of practical considerations category of questions here? I'm looking really for what I've missed, because I think I've not included utilities or that type of thing. Like, were there any others that came up that you really thought, okay, let's definitely cover this?
There's one that keeps on coming up in my mind that I can't believe I haven't done yet, but one of these days I will. But I'm in charge of, like, all of our email domains. And email domains, I don't know if, our listeners are very astute and will know the email domains are quite important, right? And so if I were ever to kick the bucket and then, like, the domain expired and someone signed up, they could basically impersonate Sara pretty darn quick, right? And go and reset accounts and all this type of stuff. And so I try to be pretty good, like whatever the maximum was. I think it was like 10 years I was allowed to buy. So I bought like very long ones. I tried putting on auto renewal, but of course, auto renewal at that point, the credit card's probably not going to work anyways. But that's a big one. I just mentioned, like, I just set up solar and all this type of stuff, and it's really, really cool. But as I was saying, usually someone takes the lead on each project, right? So this was like a project I took the lead on, and I haven't really left enough breadcrumb trails for Sara to piece it all together. Now, I put like the logins in a shared vault and stuff like that. So that's a nice first start. But it's just like, who should I call and talk to, or what's the purpose of this, and what was the thought process, or any of those things? Like, that's just all in my head. Like, just the different contractors that we work with as well. Like, that's a really important thing to let people know. Like, hey, if there's something wrong with the electricity, for whatever reason, call Stu. Doesn't matter what it is, call Stu. He'll know what to do. Like, I think that would be something really good there too.
I've started trying to do things in our calendar, our shared family calendar. Like, so, the tax forms, I think sometimes you forget to look at the beneficiaries of things, like setting up, whether it's a retirement savings plan or any of that kind of stuff, like just making sure all of those things are set up. And like listing out what you have. Like if I were to pass away suddenly, like what insurance policies do I have at work? Is there some sort of benefits at work that could help cover this? I think it's just all of those things that are kind of tied to you. You kind of need to sort of categorize it all and just put that list together. Like you said, like who's the electrician, who's the plumber, what's the front door alarm code? Which bank do I deal with? Who's the benefits provider? That kind of stuff. And I think that's sort of that extra piece of just knowing that you're trying to plan this out so that if and when something horrible happens and you're no longer with us, the person who's sort of trying to connect dots and pick up the pieces and make sure that the rest of life doesn't go off the rails, how do you make their life easier so that they can just do the process stuff? Because there is always still the emotion stuff. And so they're going to be trying to deal with the emotion side of it, but they just have to get the practical stuff done.
Sarah touched on it briefly, but insurance is a really nice thing. Like, I think we're all kind of like, well, I have enough equity in my house that should pay for my funeral, or like these types of thoughts, right? But the reality is all these expenses come right at you right off the bat, and you need to pay them fairly quickly. Whereas like things like getting the equity out of your home and stuff like that takes a lot of time. And that's if you even want to sell the house, right? Because there's a lot of emotions attached to the house. So a little bit of a carrot, I guess, for our listeners. But like, I never really thought too much about insurance, but like now that I have it, I don't know, I seem to sleep better at night. Like there's like a lot of thoughts that used to go through my head that basically now they're kind of like short-circuited. They don't continue. It's just like, no, it's fine. We have that covered. The kids know where the will is. I should quiz them on that. And they should know who our lawyer is, so they should be able to figure this out pretty quick. The ability to sleep better at night is basically why we're here, right? And I don't know, it's worth the effort is what I'm trying to say.
Nice. I bought camera insurance recently. It's not the same level, but I am now more rough with my camera and like feel confident about throwing it around. Please don't, sleep easier at night with life insurance, but then go mountain climbing. Like there's, don't push it.
I was going skiing today, Matt. You have me scared now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like, just let's go safe. I wrote down one thing here, which is I haven't included domains and things like MX records and all that kind of stuff in my will. It's one of the things that brings me on to kind of digital assets and 1Password in general. You update your will generally on average, well, what one does, like, every 3 or 4 years, maybe if you're really good at it. And all of these things that we're talking about change all the time. I buy stupid domains, I attach email addresses to them, and then I get attached to it, and then, suddenly I own .bingo or something stupid like that, right? And, really, like, the idea of all of this stuff is it's ever-changing. How do you and in general 1Password, how do you think it helps couples manage kind of digital assets that are changing as part of estate planning?
What Sarah and I have done is we have like a series of shared vaults that we have between us and the kids, between us and our parents, and like all these different scenarios. And it helps a lot because, as you say, you update your will so infrequently, whereas like every single day you're like signing up to a new account or something, and it's just got to be a part of your natural everyday flow. So like, I guess one of the things I do for estate planning, and I actually do think of it that way, is when I sign up for a new account, it's like, well, where should I save this login? If it truly is just something I'm going to use and it doesn't matter, then I put in my personal vault and that's it. But as soon as I'm just like, oh, wait a minute, I'm playing with something here that Sarah's going to need. Like, for instance, Sarah does all of her bills by paper. And so I was like, no, I really need to have like an online account for our electric bill because there's some stuff in there I need. So when I was setting that up, I made darn sure as I was saving to save it to the Dave and Sarah vault to ensure she had access because I knew that was something she was going to need. For me, 1Password is really nice in that way because like you have access to everything you need, but you have to go one level up and also like write some notes so that people know what it is that they need. The electric bill is kind of obvious. It's just like, I'll go search 1Password and I'll probably find a login for the Integris account. But do you know that you're supposed to go and look for these email domains and stuff and make sure this doesn't expire or stuff like that? Or just your email. Make sure you monitor my email for whatever reason. So
I'm not monitoring your email. He's got like 50,000 unread emails. I'm not monitoring his email.
Yeah, just close it down. Just close it down.
But I think, so when I think about it, I think people, again, they think they immediately go to like the big, like this is the problem. Like I'm going to write a will and it's going to take cover everything. And then the next day something changes and you're like, well, now I got to do a will again. I might as well not do a will because it's not a thing. Think of like your will is like your baseline. You're assigning people who are going to be in charge of stuff and all that. And then I use 1Password as a sense of this is digital housekeeping. These are good behaviors to get into. And I look at it as I use 1Password as a way to store everything. So I had a birthday coming up, so I had to get a new driver's license because every 5 years you need to get a new picture. I got my new driver's license. As soon as it arrives in the mail, before I put it in my wallet, I take a picture, I upload it into 1Password, I update all of the information, and that's just part of what I do. We got a new car. I take a picture of the ownership. I take a picture of the VIN number. I take a picture of the bill of sale. All of that kind of stuff. Like, it only takes 5-10 minutes if you just do it when you've got it. If you just leave everything and like, okay, I'm going to update everything later and make a big project out of it, things don't ever get done. If you just use it as a quick moment to be like, okay, before I put away the bill of sale, before I put the ownership somewhere, let me just upload it into 1Password. And then, like you were saying, Dave, like if you have a minute to add a quick note, like making sure the title is descriptive, you know exactly what that is when you go to look for it. And so then when you're using your search features later, you can find all of that information. So I think that's a big part of like just being a planner. It's you're not trying to go to that nth degree, but adding that practical information there so that if something happens, someone can access it without too much trouble.
I think that's great advice. And just while you were talking about email addresses, I already know that I'm going to update my will, or maybe just even my 1Password to say I definitely need to put some sort of comedic autoresponder, like out of office, but leave it on my email address for the rest of time. That's the legacy that I want to leave, I think. So can you share maybe some other types of examples of digital information? You've mentioned kind of all of the things around car purchases, and I think we've got some gems in terms of like emails and domains, but what different types of account logins or digital records, should someone save for estate planning?
When I think about it, I think about like, what's a work laptop? Writing down like serial numbers of computers. Like, this is my main computer. This is the password. How does Dave open my computer? I'm assuming we're not, severing a finger, so he's not going to be able to touch ID anything. So like, what's the main password to unlock my computer? How does he get into that? What's the PIN code on my cell phone? He knows all of this, but the super silly stuff where it's like, this is the computer I use every day, you're going to find it on here. Trying to find some way to leave sort of instructions for that kind of stuff. That's the immediate stuff you're going to need access to. But then there's like the little stuff like, what's the Wi-Fi? What system are we using for mesh? Okay, well, we've set everybody up with the same Eero network across all the houses, so we know like it's an Eero system. Here's the password for the Eero system. Here's the Wi-Fi. Here's the thing. Here's the provider that it's with. Just being able to do little things like that where knowing who's in charge of different things and knowing where you need to go to connect those dots, because it's little stuff around like hardware that you end up where you're like, oh, I need to reset the modem. Well, where is that now? Where do I find that?
So I think like with this enormous amount of stuff that is ever changing, and it's the keys to our digital lives. I buy a new phone. Actually, I haven't bought a new phone in a long while because they won't make one small enough. But like, I buy a new phone fairly regularly. I'd have a new PIN code every time I buy a new phone. And so that changes really regularly as well. And I think with this like sharing level, the question that comes to mind is, how can couples really maintain privacy, or can they, while estate planning, while still sharing relevant information with their partner and enough information?
Yeah, I was hoping you would ask that question. This one's actually really, really tricky. So I do want to take one giant step back first. There's different types of couples, as you can imagine. And so like Sarah and I have always been pretty much stunned that there's a lot of couples out there that don't share their bank accounts. But then again, those couples are stunned that Sarah and I share ours, right? And so like in many, many ways, Sarah and I have it really, really easy because like since the beginning, we've had like shared bank accounts. I recognize like not all couples are going to be like that. But for us personally, we share basically everything. So again, like that's where we're coming from. But I can imagine another scenario where, you really want that privacy. And I think that's when you need to get like a third party involved, right? So like work with your lawyer and say like, here's some information that I need to share with my spouse, given my untimely demise or incapacitation.
It's like the start of a horror movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I do agree. Like, there are many different will services out there, and kind of like a lot of them aim with digital. Even if you don't know your lawyer, you can work with these services to kind of say, okay, here's my device PIN code and even my account password to 1Password. That's the point where you can kind of transfer this stuff. You don't have to share it constantly throughout your life while you're around.
Yeah, I think that's actually something really nice within 1Password for the folks that don't want to share everything. So, you've got your private vault. It's yours. Like, he can't, like, he says he can see all my stuff, but he has no idea. He has no idea what's in that vault. But you've got your private vault. We're both administrators on the family account, though, so that if something did happen to me, he could do an account recovery, because then he'd have control over my email anyways. He could complete the account recovery and he'd be able to log in as me. So he'd be able to get into that private vault then. We encourage people to print out their secret key when they get it. There's a spot on there to write down your main account password. So I know for a lot of folks, they write something down on a piece of paper and like, this is my last will and testimony, because they've seen that's what you write down in the movies, or they do those online will kits. But you're going to print that somewhere. So when you print that somewhere, you print out this thing and you put it down there and you say, this is my keys to everything digital. If I pass, you'll need this. Go to this website, log in. It's all written out there for you. But then putting that with that will, which is going to be somewhere secure, and then knowing that someone could then log in and get access to all of your files. Like making sure you're leaving that digital breadcrumb somewhere with your will and including that whole piece in there. Then that way, if you aren't the type of person that shares everything, once you've passed, all of that information gets shared, and then they would log into your stuff and be able to see everything. And you don't have to share it beforehand. It's there, it's secure, and you have that person as your backup for the eventual, unfortunately, when things happen.
Yeah, so what I used to do was I used to put in the will, and it was in like the first draft of it, but I put in this spot in my house, you will find where my master password is written, because I did not trust that service to have my master password. But now we have the secret key, and it is like device bound to the thing. I can actually see like what devices I have attached to that account, and I can know that no other person is coming to randomly log in if that service gets compromised. So I just put my master password. It felt very, very weird, but I put it in plain text in the will. Switching up gears slightly, how do you think couples gently approach conversations around estate planning with elderly parents or kids? Like, what tips do you have for teaching children and handing over responsibility and access so that they know what to do when needed?
Start small, I would say. At least that's a starting point. For kids, like Jack's known since he was like 7 or 8 years old that he needs to go to 1Password to find his Roblox password so he can go in and play his favorite game. Right? And so he just became accustomed that he needs to, when there's something important, he needs to go to 1Password and he'll find it there. And so he's 16 now, and I like to think that in the event something happens, maybe he'll go poke around and maybe find a few things in 1Password. But also we talk about it from time to time as well. Parents, I think kids are the easier one. In some ways it's harder, but I think overall I think it's the easier one, because like on some level they kind of feel like they have to listen to you, right? Parents, I think, are the more difficult one. So for the longest time, I just basically did nothing. But Sarah, I don't know, somehow Sarah worked her magic. She has my parents putting all of their important information into 1Password and into shared vaults. And so it's funny because like my mom loves Pokemon. Like she's one of the Pokemon Go. She's like absolutely outstanding at this game. Anyways, when she needs her password, she knows she has to go to 1Password because that's where Sarah put it, right? And so like, it's almost like you got to have carrots. You got to place as many carrots in the road as possible so for people to kind of pick up. And so like she's slowly but surely, I hope anyways, has learned that, she has to put stuff in there so she can find it later.
I think it's little things like that where it's like, oh, okay, I can make life easier for everyone if I just put it in there. I think it's the demonstrating how you do things. And I think it's just the little conversations over time. Not everything has to be like, all right, sit down, children. Let's go through the discussions and the plans and like why it's important to have digital legacy keeping. And like, it doesn't need to be a big discussion. It's just oh, congratulations, Jack. I'm glad you got your driver's license. Let me add it into 1Password before you stick it in your wallet. little things like that where it just becomes a habit. It just becomes part of the conversation. It just becomes part of what you do. And I think by building up, like, it's like, I think back to like brushing your teeth and flossing and all that. Like when you're tiny and you're learning how to do things as an adult human, when you do them regularly and you understand it needs to be done because it's how you build a healthier body, that's a good thing. So it's taking all of these things and just making them good, healthy habits because it's how you become a healthier human and it makes your life easier in the long run. And so, yeah, it's just good habit forming, really.
What have been some of the biggest lessons or surprises as you've worked together on your own estate planning that you could share?
I think disagreements, things like I want to be cremated and just sort of thrown to the wind. He wants to be like in a weird box and like,
with a beautiful tree,
headstones and trees and like, I think it's little things like that where you can be very similar as humans, but have completely different ideas of what the end looks like for you. And I think it's about understanding what they're looking for and how you can, fulfill final wishes and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, it comes down again on all of when you hit a difference, when you don't agree with like, this is what I want to see happen at the end of life, or, this is where I would move donations or do anything like that. Like, being able to have a disagreement about things and having a discussion about it and really try to understand where the other person's coming from. I think that's you don't have to agree on everything, and it's okay to be like, okay, well, I guess it's more reason for me not to go first because I don't want that to happen. But, listen to what the other person's after.
Yeah. Moving on to my last question. Were there any moments of this, from your own experience, of this planning process that influenced the design or features of 1Password, or that gave you a wish list for features to 1Password?
I wouldn't say directly estate planning per se, but the document storage was huge for me. Being able to say, I want to upload the driver's license. I want to upload this. I want to have a note that's, like mother-in-law's medication list. Being able to upload all of that kind of stuff was really important for me in 1Password, just to be able to have that catalog of all of that digital information.
There's a feature I've wanted for quite some time, actually, where, if I recall, it's like Shamir, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but Shamir secret sharing. And so the idea is you can take a key, like an encryption key, and you can break it up into multiple parts. And so like you can share it with individual people. So like if I could give a piece of the key to Sarah, I could give a piece of the key to Matt, give a piece of the key to my lawyer. And so like if Sarah wanted to get into my account, she actually wouldn't be able to just with her key alone. She would have to go and reach out to Matt or the lawyer and say, hey, I need your key, and then work that out and be like, why? Dave's still doing fine, right? And then once enough people collect the keys together, they're able to unlock the account. There's a lot of dragons there, a lot of tough nuts to crack, but that is a feature I'd love to have in 1Password at some point in time. We've talked about like recovery buddies and stuff like this for quite some time. And every time we explore it, we find even more dragons. But I think one day we're going to make that a reality.
I think what you just described was a Horcrux, but I'll gloss over that.
I was thinking Power Rangers, so I don't know.
When you were looking for the name and then you described it, I was like, that's definitely a Horcrux. So I hope that this conversation has been helpful to you, and thank you so much to Dave and Sarah for joining us and walking through all of that. We will leave lots of helpful links in the show notes for getting started with digital estate planning in 1Password, so do feel free to check that out. And thanks again.
I was going to say, if anything, you can use this podcast as a conversation starter with your loved ones to say, I just listened to this podcast. These people are absolutely bonkers. What do you think? Are you a box or a pot? Use whatever resources you have to have the conversations going, because that's how you get it done.
Perfect. And I think what we've all learned today is that the thing that we should really put on our will is where your Horcruxes are located, and just see if that, just see how that works itself out.
Yeah, don't make everything a riddle. Just make a map. All right, it's time to go on to Ask 1Password. So let's jump over to our advice segment where you can ask Roo anything. Today's email comes from Dave Rosencrantz, who says, "Hi all, thanks again for the shout out regarding Wallace and Gromit. Being called a special kind of nerd is high praise from you folks." I love that. I love that. Here's an Ask 1Password question for Roo. Will 1Password be adding more extensions to their privacy browsers other than Brave, i.e. DuckDuckGo, Orion, Tor, or LibreWolf, or more email alias integrations other than just Fastmail? Ask that question first, and then I'll go on to his other question.
Yeah, so will we be adding more extensions for privacy browsers? Nothing to announce today, Dave. It is when we go beyond some of the mainstream browsers that we've added support for, those tend to be pretty manual processes for us to get in to actually support these other browsers, because we want to make sure that the extension is running within a browser that is well vetted and well supported. So at the moment, we have no plans to add support for additional browsers. In terms of email alias integrations, other than just Fastmail, nothing to announce there either, I'm sorry to say. Yeah, this is kind of a disappointing one because I don't have anything to announce.
It's one of those, though, I know that's when I think about it, and I'm like, it can't be that hard. Just make a little sticker and add it on. It's much more difficult to create those extensions, and then it's the maintenance, it's the ongoing, and then they have a version update, and then you have to step the version update, and it does get very complicated very quickly. So
these browsers also pop up all the time.
Yeah, they do.
I am trying out Horse Browser at the moment.
Of course you are.
Have you seen this?
No.
You do have to pay for it, but it's a good browser. 1Password support for it is coming very soon from their side, not ours. But yeah, Horse Browser.
Interesting.
Incredible.
Okay. Also from Dave, he wanted to share with us an example of how he creates and stores alternative security questions in 1Password. Good luck trying to gamify these. So, alternative security question number 1. The challenge: Abbott, Swag, Hughes, Connolly.
So obviously that, the first bit is generated.
I don't think so. I think somehow and the answer to this challenge is leave my mother out of this. So I'm assuming that there's something with Billy Connolly, and I'm wondering if it's Abbott Elementary, the TV show, and then and it's a tagline in there. I don't know.
No, this is generated. It's gotta be. I think this is our word generator. So, the word generator is the first bit, but it's just fascinating that he hasn't done that round the other way, where, the secret question that is stored is the nonsense or the thing that you would remember or notice.
I think this is some sort of mystery clue. So the next one is Camelot, Scholar, Mikado, Mercury. And it's my hometown is none of your business.
Right.
And I'm thinking that's got to be something with Freddie Mercury.
I would love to see you try and sit down for hours and work this out and then find that it's generated randomly from the password generator.
I think Dave is just really doing, this is like when Dave and I get in a room. My Dave, not this Dave. Sorry, I'd never met you, Dave, but would be nice. Maybe someday we can talk Wallace and Gromit. Anyways, when my Dave and I are in a room and he starts doing the guy who's in the thing.
Oh.
No, the one with the beard. The other one. Yeah, that one.
He was in that movie with the other one.
Yeah. So that would be the security challenge. And I would be like, yeah, it's this guy. And that would be the answer. I think that he's making these up.
I just like the idea of you printing out pictures of Billy Connolly, Abbott Elementary, and then pinning them on a wall and trying to work this out in an old school detector way.
I feel like maybe there's something. I don't know the third one that he sent: Cinema, Trixie, Symmetry, Hobbit. My third car was more memorable. Again, maybe he had, maybe his fourth car was some sort of, I don't know. There's got to be something. These can't be generated. There's got to be a story. So unfortunately,
I think the answer is to do with the security question that they usually ask, which is leave my mother out of this. What's your mother-in-law's maiden name? My hometown. That's a common one that's asked. Third car. I don't think I've ever had 3 cars. I think I'm on my second car. I don't think I've had 3 cars. So.
Why do you sound like one of the Beatles right now?
I don't think I've had 3. I can't do a.
I don't think I've ever had 3 cars.
That was pretty good.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think we have to ask Dave to email us back to tell us how he does that, because I think that there's some sort of mad genius going on here, and I don't think it's random. So we have to find out. But for all of our listeners out there, if you have questions for us that you'd like us to answer on the show, you can send them to podcast@onepassword.com. And you're welcome to include your name for a shout out or let us know if you want to stay anonymous. So thank you for that, Dave. And I look forward to finding out who's right on this one. So
Yeah, please email back and tell us what the heck that was.
All right, it is time for alternative security questions.
It's alternative security questions. The game show that answers the questions that no one asked for.
Traditional security questions are overused and predictable, so here we get to suggest some alternative security questions with less predictable answers. Contestants, this week Matt and Sarah, will create fake answers to obscure questions, trying to outwit me, the host, by occasionally slipping in real answers unnoticed. As the host, I will award points for my favorite answer based on comedy or creativity. I must also try to detect if any of the answers were real or not. We play 3 rounds and answer 3 alternative security questions. This week's alternative security questions are, starting with number 1, if you had to create a new public holiday, what would it celebrate? Sarah, you first.
I was going to go with Loose Change Day.
Oh, good one.
And, I was going to turn it into you go check out your couch cushions, check your car, look for all that stuff, and then you could donate it at the end of the day. I thought that might be a nice one.
All right.
Mine is Mismatching Socks Day. I think everybody wears mismatching socks, and I think that you knock on your neighbour's door and you can swap socks, just one, with them.
No.
Everybody's washed them. Okay, that's a government thing completely. That's like a mandated.
We can't get people to turn on 2-factor authentication, but we're gonna make sure everyone's washed their socks properly.
Yeah, the day before as well.
Nice.
So that's sock washing day, and then mismatched socks day would be you can swap socks, one sock, with your neighbour, or meet up in a group. Maybe there are designated meeting spaces for people to swap socks.
So I don't know if you actually know this, Matt, but every year on March 21st, people come together to celebrate World Down Syndrome Day, where they wear brightly colored mismatched socks.
Oh, that's lovely.
So you kind of already got one.
Yeah. All right. So Matt has inadvertently hit on a real holiday. Okay.
Yep. Which is a good holiday to bring some awareness to. So
a very good holiday. Yes. Okay. Number 2. What's the worst outfit you've ever worn? Matt, we will start with you.
I had a long Matrix leather coat. It was terrible.
It's not that ascot that you used to wear to AGConf?
What's the ascot? What is an ascot?
It's like a scarf thing.
It's a little tie
puffy
thingy.
Scarf.
Okay. Oh, right. No, that was brilliant.
It's the British word, isn't it?
Yeah, but
I did not know.
In the context, I didn't know what you meant, because that's a beautiful scarf. It's also a cravat. An ascot is a very particular type of.
Okay. Jeez, so sorry.
Apologies. Our sensibilities are. Yeah.
I wore it ironically.
Uh-huh.
I was not wearing the Matrix coat ironically. I think that was the problem.
Oh no. Okay. Incredible. Sarah, what about you?
I think I got to ask my kids at some point, but this one was a hard one. I've got a number of things in the closet where I bought them because somebody was like, "Oh, that looks amazing in the dressing room," and then you get home and you're like, "I'm never wearing this in public." I think the worst is it's a pair of, they're blue, but it's more like a teal blue with almost like a snake skin print on top of them pants. They're just, yeah, they're bad.
Sorry, teal blue.
Teal blue with a snake skin faux cover vinyl print on them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, last alternative security question. If you could have one useless superpower, what would it be? And Sarah, we will start with you today.
Not blinking, so I could win a staring war.
Oh my God.
I don't care for that.
So, okay. I have questions about this.
Right? You're in a staring war with someone. If you don't have to blink, and you don't flinch, right?
Okay.
You would seem like you're never scared of something, right?
That's
I've not
true.
been in that situation very much.
It seems pretty useless, right?
It definitely is. You know what? You're right.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of a good useless superpower. That just seemed pretty useless.
Matthew, what about you? What about yourself?
I expect something really good from Matthew now that we're calling him Matthew.
Like, the problem is, I like the idea of, like, a seemingly useless, but actually, like a low power, but actually useful. So, like, I would really like to keep beverages at the same temperature. But that's not useless, but it is like a low power, you know, it's a mainly single-use superpower. I would like to just, in my hand, the beverage, if it's cold, it stays cold. If it's ice cold, it stays ice cold. If it's hot, it stays hot. The secondary one that I came up with, I don't know whether we're allowed to.
Yeah, no, go ahead. It's fine. This game has no rules.
I've had superpower discussions several times because I think it's quite an amusing thing to like pick holes in. The superpower to know exactly how many pages in a book are left is a pretty good one. Because it would be a superpower, but it would be really useless, wouldn't it?
Yes, it really would.
Well, I'm waiting for... So you asked, but do you have a superpower that sounds less useless? Like...
No, like, listen, your answer was great, Sarah. Like, you nailed it, okay? Just came out strong, not blinking. So we're going to go in reverse order. So 5,000 points to Sarah for not blinking.
Is that actually a superpower, or would it be, like, medically diagnosable? That's the question I have about that.
I make the rules here. So
Okay.
Sarah gets 5,000 points for not blinking. The worst outfit is, listen, that teal blue with bow snake skin
Yeah.
sounds so incredible that as cringy as the Matrix coat is, I think I have to go with the teal blue. So another 5,000 points for that. But Matt, you're going to get 4,000 points for the Matrix coat, so that's good.
Okay.
The new public holiday, it's going to be Mismatched Socks Day because Matt inadvertently hit on a real worthwhile holiday. So we're going to go 5,000 points for that. Now, in terms of like which ones of these are real, I do believe that Matt had a Matrix coat. And, well, I also believe that Sarah has those faux snakeskin teal
I'm going to
blue
see if I
tights.
can find him.
Go. I'm pulling those out as the two real ones for today.
Yes. Yeah, you're right with the Matrix coat. It was in the bin before the Matrix 2 came out, so
Awesome.
Short-lived bad.
it was short-lived.
That's so great.
All right, I have to run, so love you both.
Love you both.
Love you both.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also leave us a rating or review. It's one of the best ways to support Random But Memorable, and we always love reading your feedback. We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us, topics, requests, or even guests you want to hear from, please send us an email at podcast@onepassword.com. We read all your comments and look forward to hearing from you. We hope you join us in the next episode for plenty more random moments in the world of cybersecurity.